Well, thank you so very much. And for those who don't know, I actually have had a very extended break. I had 8 weeks off. I know. Someone had to do it. For those who may recall, we visited our son and daughter-in-law and our 2 grandchildren in Romania, which was a lovely sort of reunion, as you could imagine. We spent a week in Italy, and which was very hard to take. The airfares were incredibly cheap, and I'm serious. To go from Romania to Italy cost us 4 adults, 2 kids, return $275. As you can see, we went to Italy. And so that was a lovely thing. And then we went to America, and we went to the International Directors Conference, all the officers from around the world, hence my new top that I'm wearing. So this is the first time I'm wearing it in public. And we stayed there and we did a couple of radio interviews, and as well as attending the conference to catch up with people from about 14 different offices from around the world, it's a bit like a reunion and summer camp combined into one, and you're hearing like-minded people who are passionate about families, passionate about healthy relationships, and so that was really good. And then to top it all off, we went to Canada. And if anyone's been to Canada, it is the most beautiful place in the world. Like, it's stunning. The scenery, you're looking at a backdrop, and if anyone would like to see any of my photos, you can always come and have a ask afterwards. But the beautiful scenery. And I say all of this not to say, hey, look at me, I just had this wonderful trip away. But what we found, and one of the highlights of our whole trip, was to slow down and spend time not only with one another, but with other people. And so we had the most amazing conversations to our Uber drivers. For those who have got a faith, we were able to pray for them at the end of our Uber Lyft drive. We helped people, complete strangers, with their relationship issues that didn't have any faith, and we just spent an hour and a half with them for breakfast. And then they said, would you like a lift? And we said, yeah, sure, that'd be lovely. We met a person in a burger place. I got an email from him just today. So there's been all these different types of conversations when you slow down and listen to people. And I tend to do that, but I know in this fast-paced world, we can have lots of challenges and we say, we've got this to do and that to do, but to slow down. And that's what you're doing tonight. You're going to be slowing down and to hear some information that'll hopefully be helpful for you and your relationships. And we know we've got some people who are single, we've got some people who would like to be married, we've got people who have been married before but it didn't work out. We've got a whole variety of different people. For whatever reason you're coming tonight, I'm hoping that some of the things that I'm sharing with you will be of great benefit to you. And for those who are also interested, my wife, who came to the last time, had no voice. And then we left in faith that she would get well, but we arrived in Singapore for 24 hours and she was sick as a dog. And then we had to go to Munich, and then to Munich to Cluj, and she was still sick as a dog. And then as soon as she arrived in Cluj in Romania, her voice returned and her energy returned. Quite miraculous. And from someone who couldn't walk to the letterbox and back without feeling fatigued, we were walking 10 plus kilometres every day. So it was quite extraordinary. So she's come back, and we've been in a lovely summer wearing shorts and t-shirt every day, to the winter of Melbourne. It's cold. It's really cold. And I think she's either allergic to our house or it's just the cold, or getting back from jet lag. So we've only been back for a week and a half, so it's been quite a busy time. Now, I've got here it is. For those who don't know anything about Focus on the Family, we've been part of Australia for over 30 years. And we do a variety of things. Radio is one of those things, doing seminars, and I'll talk about some things. And hopefully you might be able to, and I would encourage you, if you like to take photos of the slides, by all means doing it. Or you can go and Xingping, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. She's taking some notes and you can see her afterwards. So, all right. If you've got some questions, you can do this anonymously. So everyone get their phones out and pretend that you're going to look this up. But you can ask questions anonymously about anything. My husband, da-da-da-da, my wife, da-da-da-da, and it's anonymous. All right, so by all means, have a look at that, and if you'd like to ask some burning questions, and I've asked a few people prior what they would like to get out of tonight, and hopefully I'll be able to address many of those things today. For those who would like to find out a little bit more about management of your finances, on Sunday morning here, there's going to be a presentation by a financial advisor. So there's someone who I highly recommend that can talk about it in a much more detailed fashion. I'm going to give an overall about relationships and money finances and a healthier perspective of finances. But as you can imagine, in a 4-hour seminar, is that what we've got? 4 hours, Kathy? Is that right? 4 hours? Yeah, 4 hours. No, it's not 4 hours. Some people are saying, you said it was only going to be an hour and a half. Hopefully you will be able to get a little bit of a picture, but it's always good to have an attitude of learning. And that's what tonight will be, but also on Sunday morning. So that's available and you can get a QR code. I'll show that to you a little bit later on. For those who you can help yourselves to some free different things, there's a family devotional if you'd like to do that. There's a fridge magnet. Everyone likes fridge magnets. That's available to you. I've got a new newsletter that's just been printed. It's only arrived this week, so that's just available if you'd like. And some other information about Focus on the Family if you would like to do that. Now, for a little bit more investment, in September, it's actually National Marriage Week, and we're actually hosting an online marriage course. It's over 5 weeks, and you can do it in the comfort of your own home. That's available to you if you'd like to attend that. But if you want to go to a higher level, this is to get some serious brownie points, but also to get away, we're actually hosting 2 marriage retreats down at Phillip Island. And it's called Journey to Us. And it's something that we feel really strongly about that can actually improve the health and well-being of your relationship. You don't have to come with problems, you come to improve your relationship. And that's available, so you can find out more details. And we're also just about to launch for National Families Week a video, it's called Together. And that's something else that we filmed with The Light at the beginning of this year, and we've actually recorded that, and so that's available to you as well. But if you want some different advice or different things, you could sign up for that. But this is us. We've been married for 33 years. We've got 3 boys. They've all grown up. And now we've got 3 beautiful daughters-in-law. And because we didn't kill our kids, we've got 3.5 grandchildren. Did I say we were going to have another grandfather last time? I was going to be, yes. And that's the Romanian couple, and they're coming back. They were going to come back for Christmas. Someone miraculously gave them a gift to fly back. And they just got 2 days later, they said, can we come back a bit earlier? And we said, sure, you can stay with us, which, yeah, really hard to take. And it says she's pregnant with number 3. And so they're going to be having the baby, and then 6 weeks later, after the baby's been born, go back to the -20 in Romania. Good luck to them. But we're going to be talking about marriage and money, it's not going to just be on marriage, because there's some people who aren't married, but it's not just going to be on money, but it's combining the two, and it is the number one issue that can cause the most amount of pain in a relationship. Now, obviously, there's other things that can cause pain, infidelity and addictions, but conflict resolution or unhealthy conflict resolution causes so much fighting when it comes to managing your finances. And I'm not assuming that you're coming here in conflict, but you might be. So if I see someone going like this, I know it's you. But just go in with an attitude that we're learning together, and that's a key word, doing it together. If you're married, there's some key components to this, and it's to change the language. To change the language for this is my money to our money. We're doing this together in partnership. We work together as a team. Soon as people, and you might have some questions about should we have separate bank accounts and all those things, put those into the Slido, and I'll be able to answer those questions if you'd like to find out a little bit more. All right. Now, I'm not assuming everyone's got a faith, but I thought it might be mentioned because a lot of people, even outside the church, say, you know what, always the church is talking about money. And we're in a church, so I thought about talking about money. But there is a lot of Bible verses that talk about money. Far more. In fact, there's about 20% of Jesus' teaching had to do with either finances or treasures or valuing things. So it's an important topic to manage this well. And there's lots of Bible verses which I won't be sharing, but for every now and then. But some people say, well, is money bad? The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Now, it's not saying if you are wealthy, it is bad. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's the love of money. It's a form of idolatry. It's a form of I'm worshipping money, and money is the most important thing in my life. And if you hear that language, that's when there's disruption. That's when there's dysfunction. That's when things go out of hand. The love of money is the root of all evil. When you put that above everything else, and it'll make a lot more sense as we go along. And then it talks about, for where your treasure is, your heart will be there also. So it is a heart issue. And it may make you feel uncomfortable, but when we get a right-sided attitude towards money, when we start putting it in the right perspective, it actually relieves you of stress. It actually releases you of that tension that is often, that can arise. And when you're doing it together, this is in a marital relationship, when you do it together, the stress is reduced. And this will make a lot more sense as I go along, all right? So, money is not a means to an end, it's a means. You know how people are talking about, it's a means to an end, but it's actually just a form of how we do life. It's how we function. It's how we live our lives. Now, talk about this line, living within your means. Has anyone heard that expression? I would like you to just change it a little bit more, and I'll mention this a bit later on. Live beneath your means. You can write that down. It's a key word. Live beneath your means. Because what happens is people use their credit cards and they extend their means, and it continues to create this snowball effect, and they feel constant pressure and tension because they can't get that credit or that debt down. So again, it's a matter of the heart. And if we get it in the right size and the right proportion or the right perspective, then it helps us reduce stress. Now, because I know very wealthy people who live very stressful lives and unhappy lives. And I know people who are very poor but yet very rich lives. So it is not your life problems are solved with money. But having an attitude, a right perspective of money can actually make you much more fulfilled and much more healthy living your life together. So, money thinking. You may have said this in the past. Things like, we need more money. Or, if only I had. You know that expression of keeping up with the Joneses? And we do this all the time. Has anyone, look at the social media feeds. Look at how happy they are. Look at the holidays. Look at the meals they eat. They just look so happy. And they've got the latest car, or they've got the latest and greatest different things. And we can feel left out. And they look so happy. But I just spoke to a woman just yesterday who was sharing with me a couple that she's been supporting. And it's heartbreaking what's going on behind the scenes. But on their social media, everyone's happy. It's like completely different contrast. On their social media persona, life is great. In reality, it's not. So we can sometimes think about other people's, their problems are being solved. They've got those issues, they don't have to worry about finances. But we all have, because we all have the potential of becoming concerned or worried or anxious, worried about the future, worried about those things. And sometimes it's important to put the money in the right perspective. And this will make a lot more sense as we go along. Now, there's a lot of external factors. And obviously inflation at the moment is a significant part to play. Interest rates increasing. There's a definition called financial or mortgage/rent stress. Have you heard this expression? The definition, and this is worldwide, they would say that financial or mortgage stress, rental stress, is when your income is 30% of your income is going towards paying back loans or rent. 30%. You know what's happening to people now? That because of the interest rates have gone up so significantly, people's rates of not just 30%, it's going up to 55 to 60% of their salaries are going towards paying their mortgage. So we're talking about not only stress is 30%, if you multiply that by 2, it's causing an enormous amount of stress. And when people are stressed, they say things or do things, and you can see how it spirals into dysfunction. So that's a factor that is difficult in a world that the inflation is increasing significantly, rent's increasing, interest rates are going up, and that becomes really, really difficult. We recently had to change we've got health insurance, and that's increased by about 25%. We're thinking, hang on, we're not using it, and yet it's going up, and this is because everything's going up. I mean, just before we left, someone dented our car. It wasn't our fault, and it only had a little bit of damage. You could hardly tell, but it had gone through the paint. You know, like it had to be repainted and resurfaced. You know how much it cost just to do one little door? $2,200. Fortunately, I wasn't paying for it. They had to pay for it. But just little things like that are increasing the amount of stress that people going on. And when I say the psychological factors, it'll make a lot more sense because we all come from different perspectives, different understanding. Both male and female have a different perspective of finances. And you might find this quite actually helpful. But before we get into that, where we get those external or those psychological factors is how did you get brought up? You know, did you get role modeled good financial management? Our family of origin has a very big part to play when it comes to managing our finances. If you were brought up with a family, and my wife was one of those, my wife's dad was a lawyer. He was very bad with money, but he had a lot of money. But he spent it all. He didn't save it. He wasn't very good. And because of his family of origin, he was brought up really, really poor. And he had determined for his family, no one would go without. So he bought them their cars. He paid for their petrol. He paid for their car maintenance. If they wanted new clothes, he would give it to them. He had a whole drawer full of money that they could just help themselves. That's how my wife was brought up. I, on the other hand, were brought up in a very quite conservative, non-risk management. We didn't lack for anything, but we didn't want for anything either. It's sort of like that type of... So my parents saw Kate's upbringing, and they were very concerned. They were very, very concerned. In fact, they actually shared their concerns because I was a nurse, and I was getting paid $180 a week. That was my salary. And they were wondering whether Kate was going to expect to have the lifestyle, because, you know, their idea of, roughing it was going to a 3-star hotel, that type of mentality. But, you know, she relieved them of their stress. But that's our family of origin, difference of opinions, different experiences. And if sometimes the pendulum can swing, you know, you might have had a dad who was a real Scrooge, so then when you get free, you like to spend money. And if you've been brought up in a family, freedom, but the other person has just free and wants to spend money and you're a saver, there is tension. And how do you have those conversations? Now, this is one of those, and especially if you've been in a situation where you've been, say, for example, bankrupt. I met a gentleman in Canada who had been bankrupt. Everything had gone... He didn't do any bad management. It was just circumstances. He lost everything. He's now a multi-millionaire. So he's gone from one pendulum of nothing to plenty. But he's had to grapple with the changes of those. His experiences can make him feel a little bit more concerned about managing his finances. And everyone has a different experience. As I was identifying before, that actually forms our thinking, and we'll talk about thinking in just a moment. Now, this is the one thing that I think is really worthwhile. Women, if there's lack of money, don't feel as secure. They feel more anxious. Whereas for men, when they don't have as much money or the lack thereof, it affects their self-esteem, their self-worth, their self-confidence. So when there's a situation where there potentially is not as much money around the place, the man is thinking, I'm hopeless, I can't provide for my family, I'm feeling really worthless. And if the wife then goes, yes, you are hopeless, they're already feeling bad. They don't need to be reminded. They don't need to have that reinforced. You shouldn't have bought that car. You should have, they're already saying, yes, I probably shouldn't have bought that car. You don't have to rub salt into the wound. For a wife who's not feeling, secure, for the man to go, oh, we've got no way of paying the money. They're already, reinforcing the negative aspects of having without. What your wife would need in that situation is that security. We're going to get out of this together. They need that security that we're a team. We're going to work this out. Do you see how the differences actually make a big difference to the way that we look at our relationship and money together? And how, if we have significant differences, the importance of narrowing the gap. And the final thing is how we are content. There's a guy named Paul in the Bible who talks about, I've learnt to be content with much, and I've learnt to be content with very little. It doesn't matter if you've got much or little. It's being content, and it's that attitude. It's a matter of the heart. Now, we learn things from our parents, how to manage our finances, sometimes good examples, sometimes not so good examples. You don't have to have a show of hands, but there'll be some people going, yeah, I know, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We also have, there's a thing called generational poverty. So if your parents are poor, you can have a generational poverty mindset, and then you'll say, well, that's the way it's always going to be and never going to change. That can be the generational poverty mindset. However, if you look at some research and data, those who are in the Fortune 500, about 60 to 70% of those who are now very wealthy came from a very poor background. They were determined to change their mindset, to change the generational poverty mindset. So you can't blame everything. It's about an attitude and doing the hard work that requires you to think about and not expect someone else to rescue you. And unfortunately in our culture today, and I'm not saying in this room like this, but a lot of people just rely on the government to bail them out. And they don't realise that if you continue bailing out people, and you may have heard the expression, teach a man to fish, they'll last a lifetime, but if you keep on giving them the fish, they'll become so dependent upon you. That's the same thing. If we continue to hand out things, people's self-worth and self-confidence goes down because they feel like, well, I'm hopeless, I can't do anything, and it just is this perpetual cycle. The other things you might need to do is this money script, and I'm going to get talking about what that money script is. This is the thinking. So if you're writing notes or taking photos, there's about 4 or 5 different money scripts that we have our thinking towards money, and it will make a lot of sense now. Now, here's one money script, a thinking pattern of our finances. This is have a negative aspect. We should live poor lives. We should be martyrs. We have that martyrdom or that poor attitude towards finances. And they're thinking that if you're wealthy, it is negative. It's well, for want of a better word, evil. And that's not the case. Another mindset is, the money, the root of all evil is money, but it's not. It's actually, people will say, well, money corrupts. Yes, if you put it in the right, take it out of the right perspective, but money doesn't corrupt. People do. It's not money. The other things you might do is we have that pious, I'm so poor, I am holier than thou. There's that mentality. That's a different script, a different mentality. Okay, so another script is if I have more money, I can get more stuff. And it's a distortion of the thing. It will solve all of my problems, and how many people will know that it hasn't solved all the problems? I just saw, and as I was doing the preparation, there was a guy who won in a lotto in America $186 million in a lotto. He is now bankrupt. My mind boggles how you could lose that much money. But because of poor management, it doesn't solve the problems. It can cause a lot more problems. And he found everyone, his long-lost relatives, all came back with their hands open, and friends he never knew he had came out, and he just kept on giving away, and that's what happened. Another thing that we've seen, a distortion, and some, you may have heard this called the prosperity gospel. Some churches have done it. You know, if you give to this ministry, you will be blessed. And God wants you to be blessed. God wants you to be wealthy. God wants you to, in fact, I was talking to a friend of ours. They've got a guy who was convinced, someone made him an offer that if he invested $100,000, I'm not kidding, this is for real. If you invest $100,000 in this land, somewhere in Africa somewhere, when it rains, diamonds come to the surface. He went to invest $100,000. He didn't even have the $100,000. He just, and because he was convinced that this is what was going to happen. I'm thinking, and he's also convinced that God's going to bless him with a mega launch or a boat, because God wants him to be happy. This is his distorted thinking. And again, it's an attitude, a matter of the heart. And when we put money first, it can consume our whole thought patterns. And we forget the most important people in our lives are the people we see, not the things in our wallet, which I'll come back to later. Another script that we have is, hey, I look good. I have the right clothes, I have the right car, I have the right job. That's a status thing, that's an identity thing. Other aspects could be, and we talked about the social media, if I look wealthy, then I must be successful. My son worked for not a law firm, but a consulting firm. And he always wore a wonderful suit, like a tailor-made suit. He invested in that, and that's when he started his first job. He bought 3 suits because he had to wear a suit every day. And he held himself confidently. He looked very much like me, very handsome. I'm not joking. And he went to an event. It was a golf day. And he had, for his car, because everyone only had seen him in his suit and expected him to have like a Tesla for a car, because he looked the part. Anyway, what he had was a Suzuki Liana. Has anyone seen a Liana? No, but yes, they're not very common. Anyway, to top it all off, he was a youth leader, and part of what he did as an activity for his boys was to paint his car with chalk paint. And it was this denim colour that when it rained, it looked like it was crying. That's what it looked like. And so he's at the lights, and a guy from his firm comes alongside him, and he just had this picture in his mind. And sometimes our appearances aren't always the reality. And he goes, why are you driving a car like this? And he goes, what do you think I am, made of money? I just came out of university. I've got, debt up to, for his double degrees and things like that. So again, we can have appearances, and they can be misleading. So when you see people, it's not always the truth. And the reason why I say that is sometimes we have to just put our own perspective on life. What is our attitude towards money? What is our attitude to managing finances? And I'll seed plant this now. What is our attitude towards generosity? It's important to save and invest. This is the Vigilant screen. This is the one that it'd be great for us all to get there, to think about how we manage our finances. And people who are vigilant with their money tend to take it seriously. And I know I'm actually saying have a open hand when it comes to money, but it's also having a wise hand when it comes to money. And it is a fine line, and you have to do your research, and you have to have an attitude of continual learning. And I say all of that is because my mother-in-law inherited a large sum of money from a long-lost relative recently, and it caused her a great deal of stress. So my wife has had to go into learning mode, and that caused her a great deal of stress as well, but because he had shares and dividends and all over the world. And she had to go on a very serious fast track of learning how to manage that. But she's coming through the other side and just done to learn a great deal. For me, I've never worried about finances. It's never been. I just always have trusted God as a faith believer that he will have it. But I'm also very good with my money. But someone would say that I'm Scroogey with my money. That would be me. But I call myself fiscally responsible. But I'm always mindful of, I may be Scroogey with myself, but I never want to be Scroogey with others. Seed planting again, generosity. Now, for your relationships, I saw this quote, and I'm going to give you two quotes. These two quotes I thought would be really worthwhile sharing. Love your spouse more than you love your career or your hobbies and your money. That other stuff can't love you back. And I just think when I hear at Focus on the Family, so many people who have distorted that, the latest and greatest, money becomes such an obsession, they become overwhelmed, and it causes so much tension in the relationship of having the things. And that couple I was talking about, the ones who look like on social media are doing really well, and in reality it's not. They had this grand plan of, knocking down their house and building it again, putting 2 units on. Then COVID hit and everything went spiked up. And now, instead of moving into a nice little home, they've had to move back in with their parents, even though they've got this brand new house before they can, and they have to sell that before they can build another one. And I was thinking the enormous amount of stress that this has caused. What looked like great, and it wasn't like they didn't have a lovely home, but it was just that they wanted other things. Now, I'm not saying it was a wrong decision. I'm not making an opinion, but you can see circumstances can result in so much pain if you don't get it right. So this is the other, and if you ever want to listen to a great podcast, you go up to Dave Ramsey. He's an American Southern Baptist type of pastor who's quite has strong opinions, let's put it that way. Strong opinions on finances, and he calls a spade, but he said this: marriage is a partnership and couples can't win with money unless you budget as a team. The reason why I'm saying that, and I'll emphasize this, I mentioned in my early remarks about them and us, or this is my money and this is your money. Should you have, I listened to a podcast just recently and he's talked about, a woman rings up and says, what are your thoughts about having separate bank accounts? And I'm going to say the same thing as he said, not to do that. It is our money. And then she said, what happens if my spouse, and this is a woman who's saying, my husband earns more money, so therefore does he have more say? And the answer to that, hopefully you'll be able to get the theme of it, no. Because as you know, in our household, I was the main breadwinner. My wife was a homemaker. She worked at part-time, but she looked after the kids. Should she have less of a say in our finances? No. The most important thing is we do our finances as this is our money. Now, that is not to say you can't have a little bit of play money. We have, if you've heard of the Barefoot Investor, some really good advice in there. And he has what they call a splurge account. And the splurge account, it means you put a little bit aside, and that can be play money, like for coffees or going out with friends. If it's spent, then you don't have to justify it. My wife loves my splurge account because I never spend it. She says, "Can I borrow from yours?" And I said, "No, it's mine." You know, like, sometimes I used to reach out for my pocket money from my wife. You know, like, can I get a hot chocolate? You know, I mean, joking. All I'm saying is that then that can be a separate little bit that you can have each. But you know what? And I'm going to seed plant this again. I know it seems like I'm building up for it. But my son and daughter-in-law, when they got married, my daughter-in-law had an incredible heart for generosity. So they had to budget a generosity account into their account. And so it didn't matter, like a splurge account, if it was in the generosity account, they could give it. And they actually, I don't know if I shared this with you another time, but my son and daughter-in-law were living in Narre Warren. It's a lower socioeconomic group where they were living. And there was a couple in their backyard, or, you know, not their backyard, but, you know, the backyard meeting together. And they always noticed that that their washing line, always had sheets on them. Every day, new sheets, every day. And it intrigued them about why would that happen? Why does it happen? So anyway, they eventually just went around to their house and knocked on the door. And they wanted to find out why they have so much washing all the time. And it turns out that their son was disabled. And he was always incontinent every night. And they found out that their actual washing machine was too small and they didn't have a dryer. So my son and daughter-in-law, and I say this with all sincerity, they would not want me to talk about this in front of them, but I say it to give you an example. They had an amount in their generosity fund. And so they, complete strangers, they bought them a washing machine and a dryer and just said, "Here you are." It's just, if you hold on to money lightly and you don't have that me mentality and you have an outward mentality, on a sub note, the father was overwhelmed, wanted to say no. They said, "No, this is our gift to you and to your son." So the man every week came around and did their lawns. So they felt like they got a good deal. I'm hoping I'm making sense about this, and especially in a marriage relationship, you work together as a team. It's not your money, my money, it is our money, and we're going to do this together. And it doesn't have someone may be better with money. Now, traditionally, it may be that men tend to be maybe more geared towards managing finances. In our household, Kate manages the finances. She's good at it. She's much better than I am. She's got the headspace for it, and so she manages the finances. She jokes about if she dies, I will have no idea how to get into the banking system. I don't know what the passwords are. Fortunately, she's told all my boys, and hopefully they can save me. But that's how every family is a little bit different. But I'm going to give you some little hints, and I've also got a homework page to give to you. All right, so at the end, there'll be something for you to work on. Financial success. Here's just some basic principles that is by no means overwhelming, but there are some basic principles. I talked about live beneath your means. Basically, spend less. Spend less. Don't spend exactly what's in the bank account each year because you just don't know what's around the corner. We've seen that when it came to COVID. You know, people losing their jobs, and we've seen this increase with the interest rates. When my wife and I bought our house back in 1990, so it's a few years ago, we had the interest rates of 17.5%. Does anyone remember those days? Does anyone have a mortgage in that time? Wouldn't it be, wasn't it? Can you imagine if you had that fixed? Yeah, and houses. We bought our house for $103,500. That's what it was. But that was still a lot of money way back then. We bought our block of land, which we are still living in now. Our block of land cost us $50,000. Can you imagine if you bought 3 or 4 blocks at $50,000 now? You know, like, Makes you sick. It's all relative. It's all relative. But we learnt during that time we were budgeted with that in mind, that mindset. So when interest rates were eventually reduced, we could continue to pay the amount that we were paying. And so we ended up paying off more of the principal. Does that make sense? What we see today is people had interest rates fixed at like 2.5%. They maxed out 2 incomes to pay for it, and that's the reason why we see mortgage stress taking place. And I feel for you. I feel for anyone who's in this room or you know people in that situation. Because you go in with a mindset that this is going to be good. In places like America, they have fixed interest rates, like it's a lifelong mortgage. It goes for 20 years at 2.5%. In Canada, they can do 5 years, very simple, and you have to renegotiate each time. But in Australia, we're one of those ones that increase. In Canada, we just found out, interest rates, if you invested in a property to rent it out, you can't increase the rent more than 2% every year. That's the maximum. But interest rates have gone up to 6.5%. So to meet up with the demands, you can imagine that causing stress. So even having people have a lot of money aren't always clear cut. Other things if I could have my way, and if you could take this for gospel, don't have a credit card. Maybe have a credit card for emergencies, just in case, but it'd be far better to have a debit card. So then you know, and you're much more careful with it. There's some benefits of overdrafts, those ones that you can actually, your pay goes into to reduce your mortgage. We tried that, it wasn't good for us, but I know other people it works really well. But people tend to think, I can borrow more money because it's all in the one account. I can just buy a car, or I can buy, dangerous territory. Try and do things without having debt. Easier said than done. And any of those things that Harvey Norman, no deposit, run away. If you cannot afford it now, don't have it. And if you're starting out, and anyone who's starting out, and if you've got children who are going to be starting out very soon, can I encourage you, don't give them everything. Don't buy them this is what tends to happen. They see their parents of what has taken 20 plus years to have. When they get married, they want to have the same thing. And they all go for a big screen TV is the number one thing, or a new couch, or a new table, or a new fridge, or a new... We shared these stories with our children. And this doesn't seem to make sense about marriage and money, but I do think it's a story to tell. Share your challenges, your difficulties. They may assume that you've always had money. You may not necessarily have money now, but I'm just saying they don't know the pain that you've gone through. So we shared with our children the stories of when we first got married, our dining room table was 2 card tables. Has anyone seen those ones that wobble? It's old school. And every time you knocked it, it would wobble and the drinks would fall like this. We had a bench, an old wooden bench that I had renovated. It looked very nice. We had 2 fridges, 2 bar fridges. One was white, the other one was brown. That was our fridge. We never bought anything brand new except for our bed, but we had a mattress that was about this thick, and you could feel every slat for our mattress. We bought everything from the Trading Post at the time. Trading Post was really in there before Marketplace and all those things. And we told our kids these stories. And you know what? They go, I want those stories. They used to joke with me when I said, look, Aldi is fantastic. You can buy milk and a whippersnipper at the same time. And they go, Dad, you're such a Scrooge. Now they're married and left the nest. The 3 things they used to say to us, one is, Dad, do you realise how everything is so expensive? Do you know how much gas is? Do you know how much insurance is? Do you know, they'll go like this. And they said, and you know what? You can get great stuff at Aldi. I thought, our job is done. Now, liquidity is something that as I said, I'm not a financial expert. I'm not trying to give you those things. But it's actually having access, in case of an emergency, money to be able to pay for things. And that's that liquidity. If you invested in like an investment property, that's not liquid assets. It's an asset, but it's not liquid assets. It's not available readily. If you want to have some liquid assets, you could actually buy gold, if you like. You know, a little, an ounce of gold. You know, how wonderful that would be. Or silver. But that liquid assets is in case of an emergency. And I'll give you an example of what it was for us. We had just returned back from our lovely holiday. Our son and daughter-in-law had been staying in our house, and they just contacted us and said, look, the hot water system's not working very well. In fact, we've got no hot water. I said, oh, that's not good. I tried reigniting the pilot, and they did. They got it back up and running. But when I came back, I looked at our hot water system, and it was leaking. It had rust all over it. Something had exploded in it, and it's still like... So I had to get a plumber in. First thing, we've just come back from this lovely trip, and he goes, wow, you need a new one. You know, like you've always got that. But because we'd put some money aside for the emergency, it wasn't as stressful because we put that aside. It was that liquidity. It turns out that it's the original one that we built 27 years ago, and it's a hot water system. He goes, I haven't seen one that's lasted this long. So we thought, that's a pretty good deal. You know, 27 years is pretty good. But you can imagine if we didn't have that money or that resource or that emergency fund, it would cause more stress. And then if we don't have that money, we'd have to borrow. Now again, it's not to say that you can be without for a period of time, but it's being disciplined enough to actually put some money aside every week in case of an emergency. And I'll make a lot more sense with another slide coming up. And the goals, which I'm going to talk about at the end. The goals... people don't like the word budget. They don't like the idea of saying, okay, I've got X amount of dollars and I'm not very good with numbers, so they make excuses. But basically, it's actually saying, I need to set aside an amount for bills. I need to set aside for my mobile phone. I need to set aside for my food. I need to set aside for my rates. I need to set aside, and so there's no little surprises. So that's what a budget is. Outlining, and there's some great downloadable resources. There's in fact a great website that I'd encourage you to go to, and it's called Wealth with Purpose. It's a Christian organisation. Many of you may know the person, Alex Cook, who's come actually to this church. He's coming back. He's a good friend of mine, and we're going to do some seminars together. And he's got a downloadable resource about how to do the budget. So if you've never thought about it before, it's got a step-by-step how to do a budget. Highly recommend it. I've already said about debt and I've already said about emergency funds. Insurance. For people who are Christians, sometimes people say, well, should you have insurance? We have faith in God. You know, like Insurance is not your lack of faith. It's actually saying, what would happen to my family if something did occur? That's the insurance policy. So that's the reason why we should have life insurance, if you've especially got a young family. That's the reason why we should have car insurance in case something happens. That's the reason why we should have house and contents insurance. These are all important things. It's not to say I don't have faith and we can't say those magic words, it will never happen to me, because guess what? It could happen. And what would happen to your family if something occurred? A house burnt down. Flooding occurred. Your car was unable to be driven anymore because of circumstances. That's the reason why we have insurance. And 80% or 60 to 80% of Australians are underinsured. It's a sobering thought, because people can't afford it. Now, there are things, you know, maybe health insurance is not the thing for you. That is expensive, but I don't think you should be without house and contents insurance. I think that should be, you know, very high priority. If you can, a small amount going towards life insurance. in case something happens to you. And it's just, you just don't know. You just do not know what's going to happen. When we hear tragic things, that recently there was someone driving down, there was a domestic violence happening, and 3 people were killed. Did you see it was in New South Wales, I think, wasn't it? Someone was in the wrong place. He was a llama alpaca farmer or something. He was driving the other way, and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was killed. Just devastating. Tell them I'll call them back. And I do say that saving is something that is a long-term thing, but there is short-term goals and long-term goals. The short-term goals, what do we have, what can we achieve in 3 months? What can we achieve in 3 years? What can we achieve in 10 years? Have incremental different things. What would you like to have? What would your preferred future look like? So, this is just to give you some ideas. You can write that down to just give you some prompts about your income plan. What is your potential worth? Many people are taking 2 jobs. We got an Uber driver while we were in America, and it was an early morning, and he started at 6 o'clock. He works from 6 o'clock till 2 as an Uber driver, and at 2:30 he's a welder from 2:30 to 12, and he works 6 days a week just to provide for his family. I just admire him greatly for his tenacious and work ethic. He goes, what else am I going to do? And that's what he was doing. That was working two jobs to provide for his family. So that's an income plan. What is the potential you can work? How could I reduce my debt incrementally? How could I, and this is the generosity, what can I do about my giving? And I'll talk about it in a few moments. The insurance plan, the retirement plan, the future. There's one study that actually said 85% of Australians at the moment are underprepared for their retirement. They're not investing enough into superannuation. And it is a very good saving scheme. I don't have all the details here, but superannuation is a very good way and very disciplined of a long-term goal of providing for you and your family when you finish work. And the average age of people are retiring now is now increased from 65, and now it's increasing to 68 to 70 years of age. And people are going to retire, but they're not going to be able to live the same income as they would like to. So superannuation is something that you should consider and thoughtfully think about. And I won't bore you with the investment plan and estate planning, except to say, if you don't have a will, get one. If you are married and have children and have family, you need to have a will. You need to have plans in place to how your money will be divided, who's going to look after your kids if something was to happen to you. Worst case scenario. So that's what you've got to think about. Worst case scenario. It's not about you not having faith. It's actually saying, I'm preparing for the worst thing that could ever happen, but I've thought about it. And on a side note, can I encourage you also to talk about what you'd like for your funeral as well? Would you want to be buried? Do you want to have your organs donated? Do you want to be able to have what is going to be said at your funeral? All these things. I know it seems really morbid to say that, but that's just forward thinking. And I think a lot of people do not know when your number is up. And I have spoken to the widows of people whose husband had died after a tragic accident. And they say, I just don't know what he wanted. I don't know what was going on in his mind. I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know what... And they can become more upset about it. My mother, God bless her soul, has left us a list. She's told us where it is, what song she wants at the funeral. She wants who's going to do what. She wants me to oversee it, the funeral. She's got it all planned. I thought, good on you, Mum. Fantastic. She's also just said, all of a sudden, she just said, I don't want a funeral. I said, great, that's fine. It's going to save us money. But she's also paid for a funeral as well. And again, that's forward planning. That's quite extraordinary. But here's a verse, and I know there may be some people who don't have a faith, but the Bible's full of different aspects of how we should live our lives. And one of the things, a generous person will prosper. He who refreshes others will also then be refreshed. there's a great philosophy that if you give to others, it will return to you. And I would say Americans in general, businesses, because it's a godly principle, it's a biblical principle, but it's also a financial business. Business makes business sense. So companies in America, they give away a lot of money because it actually benefits them. There's something, so their motive may not be necessarily pure, but there is something rewarding when, as I said, my son and daughter-in-law giving away and buying a dryer and a washing machine. How beautiful it is. This is a young couple who don't have very much, but they just gave. And I'm really, really challenged by that. Am I living a generous life? Am I giving out of myself? And I may not have much in the bank account, but I want to give of my time, my resources, my gifts, my talents. So there's not just finances that you can do to be generous. There's other things. Thinking of others more than ourselves. And all the psychologists and the counselors and psychiatrists around the world will all agree, people who have an outward focus do better mentally. Because you're not so introspective. It's all about me. And they would encourage people to volunteer, to do things for other people. It changes your perspective. And when you give things away, either financially or objects, it actually says, you know what? I feel really good. I'm feeling better about it. Because it's not, I'm holding my money loosely. I'm holding my money loosely. But here's when we're kind of a little bit of a challenge for you. If you are married or thinking about marriage or even just dating someone, you're going to go out on a money date. Now, you may not necessarily go out and spend any money because you may be so scroogey and you're complaining about money, but actually going out and discussing some finances, talking about it in an open and honest way. I've shared some things about, like the script. I've shared about the family of origin. I've shared things about your attitude towards money. I've also shared about the fact about doing life together as a team. I've shared about how you manage your finances in a way that actually says, hey, we're united in our choices. It's not me making the decisions, it's we are making decisions. Do you agree? Are we in agreement? Are we going to move forward with this, especially on different aspects? And I will put my hand up. I have done things that I'm not proud of. Do you want to hear my biggest faux pas? I'll show you. My wife, we had to buy a new car. And my wife said, because we had an old Volvo. It was like, had rust everywhere. It was just falling apart. And we had an X amount of money in our budget to actually buy a new car. And Kate says, don't buy a white car. Don't buy a manual. Don't buy a car that doesn't have air conditioning. Well, I went out with my dad and we found this car that was so good, such a good deal. It was white, but I thought, you know what? She'll get over it. It was a manual and it didn't have air conditioning. Now, if she was here, she would tell the story much better than I was. I said, look, it's got 4 windows. You can, that's air conditioning. I didn't listen to my wife, and I'm not very proud to say that. Because it was an investment, it was a deal, but I didn't listen to all what she was wanting or hearing what she was wanting, and I made a decision without her. Not my proudest moment. Now, I just defer to her. She manages the finance. It makes it a lot simpler. Ironically, that's the car that she had this serious car accident in that resulted in her being bedbound for 18 months. So she blames me. No. Only joking. So a money date. And so I'm going to actually put up for you, and this is where I want you to take some photos, all right? These are questions that I would like for you to ask yourselves on a bit of a money date. These are in no priority order. You can just pick and choose. But here are some other things. Questions to consider. How did you feel about your socioeconomic standing growing up? So it's your family of origin. What are your financial goals? See if you're on the same page. How do you handle money and want to handle money? So you actually get a different perspective. How do you think we should go about this? It's just getting it out in the open. And there's no right or wrong answers. It's actually to be aware of what's taking place in your household. And the family of origin, again, what was it like growing up? What did your mum teach you about money? What did your dad teach you about money? All of these questions. Okay, so everyone's ready to the second page? All right, there's a second page. Finding out their experiences, how they may have got their money script. Does it bring fear? Does it bring joy? What do you do? I'll use this story about financial fears. I heard of a story of a gentleman who went to a seminar, and he asked the question. He goes, I am so anxious about not being able to provide for my family. It was almost paralyzing for him. And he never shared this with his wife. But after a date night, he actually was able to share, and he says, look, I am really fearful about not being able to provide for the kids and yourself and to provide for you. Because they worked together as a team, then she was able to come alongside him, and they can actually work together. So the fear and the anxiety was reduced because they worked together as a team. If you just share it and you keep it under the rug, it will come and bite you somewhere along the line. It'll trip you up. So sharing some of your fears, share some of your anxieties, share some of your goals and what have you, and just open it up. What do you like about your spouse and their money? And as I said, my wife does an amazing job. And what are your thoughts about generosity? People have different attitudes. I'll give, a little bit here, a little bit there. He who sows sparingly reaps sparingly. There is a return on your investment. It may not necessarily be dollars and cents, but we've taught our children this, and this is again the reasons why you want to get mum and dad talking about it, because you want them to be able to manage their finances well later on. And I share this, and then we'll open up for that Slido if you'd like to ask some questions. But we talk to our boys about finances from an early age, that we didn't overwhelm them with financial woes or whatever, but we got them to understand that money doesn't grow on trees. We also spoke about the fact is that it's important to put some money aside, and for those who've got a faith, we talk about giving money to God. We talked about money for generosity, to give other things. We talked about savings, and then we talked about living expenses. We talked about those things. Our son, at the age of 14 and 9 months, that was the legal age to get a job. He got a job at Bunnings. He got his own bank account. He signed up for it as well. But he managed to get it so it was linked to my wife's account. It was all very independent, but she could actually... And he said, Mum, can you look after my finances and give me a little bit when I need to? Well, if out of sight, out of mind. After about 12 months, he goes, Mum, I need to buy such and such or some clothes or something. And she says, well, how much do you think is in there? And he goes, $750? She said, there's $3,500. He just accumulated over the year, little bits of his part-time job that he'd accumulate. But then he had that mindset, I've got this money now. But his older brother had observed our attitude towards finances. And he said to him, Cameron, just be very mindful. It's not your money. It's God's money. This is for people who've got a faith. It's God's money, and to hold it lightly. Well, fast forward, he did change his attitude. And I'm incredibly proud of him. He actually, one of his mates had to move out of the house and was really struggling to make the rent to get it up. So he said to his mate, here's the money for the first month. Gave it to him without any strings attached. And we were saying, wow, that's, where's this changed? This is an 18-year-old boy giving this money away. And we were so incredibly proud. The very next day, Bunnings, which he works for, gave him a bonus of the exact amount to the dollar. And we just said, you can never outgive God. If you hold things lightly, with a generous spirit, God will bless you. Now, that's not to say that every time you give out money, you're going to get it back. It doesn't always work like that, all right? So just letting you know, because everyone it's an attitude thing. But I say all of that to actually, you're teaching your children good managed habits now to prepare them for later on. And all our 3 daughters-in-law have all thanked us for helping our sons put money aside. So not only were they independent financially when they got married, they had a good chunk of money to pay for their own car, they had a good money to maybe put a deposit on a house, all these things that they had actually accumulated because of good management. And I would encourage you, it takes work, it takes discipline, but it's worth it for your security, for yourself, your self-confidence, your self-esteem. Knowing that it is difficult, we understand in our financial climate that it is really difficult and it can cause a lot of strain, but if you're in a marital relationship, to do it together. Hopefully that's been helpful. Okay. If you go to that Slido, again, I'm going to just go to the phone here and I'll look this up just for a couple of minutes. I'm just going to have a quick drink, and if you've got a question, you can pop it into the Slido. You may not. If it's not, that's okay. But there is a question that I had before that I'd like to, but there is a question. Oh, there's a lot of questions. Man, there are a lot of questions. All right. Okay. Let's get my glasses. Makes me look more intelligent. You laugh. All right. I'm just going to go in the order that they are. How can couples, and I haven't read these, so I'm reading it at the same time as you, and you could read them if you'd like to have access to. How can couples align on financial goals when they come from different backgrounds with competing values and attitudes of money? Go on a date night, a money date night. That's how you lower the gap. We come from different perspectives. It doesn't make one right and one wrong, it's just different. Males and females are different. Experiences are different. But I'd encourage you to start putting some goals. And even if you can't agree 100% on all things, you narrow the gap. Narrow the gap. And it'll make things a lot simpler. What happens when you are scammed? You could be hacked and have to pay for it, especially when the hacker impersonates you and uses your name. What happens when you're scammed? Well, I think due diligence is important. There's a lot of scammers out there. And they ask... They impersonate people, and my son, who is very vigilant, actually was scammed of $2,000, and this is someone who's highly intelligent, so it can happen to anyone, but he was spoofed that the contact was going to and fro, and it was all identified back to the bank that he was with. And even then, so he's actually got it all recovered because it was I think he's got some of it back. I'm not sure at all. But you have to be very diligent. Anyone who asks you and doesn't sign who they are, be careful. Anyone asks, I mean, all the banks are actually saying to foolproof them because it's costing them thousands of dollars. They'll never ask for certain details. And if anyone asks those details, don't answer the questions. And if you're at all in doubt, say, hey, I'm just going to hang up right now. I'm going to call the bank and I'll talk with them. Really. And their response will indicate how genuine they are as well. So when in doubt, don't give any information. If you've even got an inkling, don't give any information. It'd be better to actually go with that. So that'll prevent your scamming. And if you have been scammed, don't feel bad. You've just had a very, very, very valuable lesson. It is just people's moral compass. And has anyone had... We've had lots of those. I have people who's rung me up and asked me, like they say, oh, this is such and such from the Commonwealth Bank, asking. And I go, that's interesting. I don't even bank at the Commonwealth. They quickly hang up, But other times I've actually strung them along because I know it's a scammer. Has anyone done that? Has anyone strung just for fun? Just for fun. I just do it all the time. I just love doing it. Just because, and then eventually I just say, look, I am really sorry that you have to do this. It must be really difficult that you're providing for your family and you're resorting to actually, having to be deceitful. Is there anything I can do for you? And then they quickly hang up as well. But I don't want to turn it to be that they're the enemy because some of them are just doing it to survive. You hear it at some of those call centres and they're just, that's all they do. Just to scam, and they're just doing it survive. But it would be very difficult knowing that they're doing something deceitful. But people's moral compass has been severely compromised, unfortunately. What if you suddenly lose your job unexpectedly and had huge bills to pay and you can't afford it despite being sensible with your money? That is, whoever's written this, I'm very, very sorry. I'm very, very sorry. But it is very difficult when you've got so many different bills and expectations. Live beneath your means. But again, it's that emergency fund. I can't emphasize enough having the money. And ideally, if you had hindsight again, if you were in that situation, you'd probably do things differently, I would assure. Some churches ask for your bank account details to take 10% of your salary. I'm not a fan of that, by the way. That's taking it too seriously. I do think that we have to be very mindful that there is a biblical principle for those who have got a faith about 10%. There's a lot of arguments about net and gross. I'm not going to be talking about that in this forum. I'm more than happy to give you my opinion, but not in a public setting because I can be hung, drawn and quartered. But I do think if you're involved in a church community, I think you do need to invest in that community and to resource that community. That's what I do believe. But I don't believe that you should give your banking details. But automating your details, I don't have any problems with. You can give it whatever you like. Peer pressure to look good. My fiance's ex-wife only married him, had kids just to show her age, and she splashed out her money. They divorced 2018. She used them. So that's another sad story. Should a husband always be transparent with wife regarding finances, especially when work is not well? Or is it okay to keep it from her so she doesn't get worried? The answer is you have to be transparent. You can't hide it. It'll come out somewhere along the line. It's better to be open and honest because once trust is broken, it's very hard to earn that again. So I would say if you are concerned, you need to let your spouse know about that. Can the husband and father as the head of the household be responsible and monitor the household finances? Yes, husband and father as the head of the household can do that. But in our household, my wife does it. So I'm the head and she's the neck, I think is what we say. What if you lose your job and can't get another due to things that are of your control? I think this is what you were saying, but yeah. But you're on the upward now, so that's good. Regarding finances, what about superannuation, investment shares, cryptocurrency? Even financial managers don't understand cryptocurrency, so I'm not going to do it. What I'd say about investments, you have to go in the mindset, if I'm investing this, I have to be prepared to lose that money. If you're not prepared to lose that money, don't invest it. Hopefully that makes sense. You could do some play money, and I'll be very transparent. My wife thought it would be good to invest in cryptocurrency. She read about it, and she invested $1,000. You know what it's worth now? $400. Cryptocurrency has gone significantly down. But we went in with a mindset, we did it, we agreed that we would try it because everyone was seen to be working. It hasn't worked for us. And as I said, I'm saying that transparently, that it doesn't always work. We know of people who it really worked really well. It didn't for us at the moment, but it's bound to rebound. I have a wish list when I can't afford, I will buy and tick it off. I also do my Christmas shopping in the year, make things like jewellery, scarves. Yeah, make things, give away things. Great idea. Is prenuptial a good thing? I bought my house with my own money and want to protect my investment. This may come as very judgmental. I don't believe in prenuptial. This is my opinion. It's our money. If you are thinking, this is my house, and you're going with a mindset, if things go south in the relationship, I don't think you're building your foundation on solid ground. I do think you need to have some serious premarital counselling and maybe have a look about financial management, because if you're having doubts now, a seed of potential resentment may pursue, and it's not going to build a healthy relationship for the long run. So I don't believe in prenuptials. I believe in our money. If you bring in this money into the relationship, then that is our money. I do know that there's been situations where people have invested more into the relationship, invested more in the house, and then the marriage went south, and then the other person took half the assets. I do know those stories. Took half the superannuation, took half of everything, and they are tragic stories. And I'm very sorry if that is one of you that have lost out as a result. But I do think you want to set up your relationship for success, and having my money and their money is not a successful foundation. Hopefully that may come across not as harsh, but as helpful. If couples aren't fully aligned on their money mindset, how do they know if they're compatible in the long term or whether it could cause issues into the future? Go on a date night. I cannot emphasize getting the conversation and talking about it openly and honestly on a regular basis. And in fact, there's some financial advisors would recommend that you go out on a date night every fortnight. How are we going with our finances? Are we meeting our goals? How are we going? Is there anything stress? Is there anything you can forth? And it doesn't have to monopolise the whole of the date night, because I'm thinking about date nights are good for your relationship anyway. But talking about finances on a regular basis is good and healthy. So you don't want to have any little surprises. So that's where my thinking is. I think I've answered most of those questions. Someone actually asked me prior to the event about cultural relevance when it comes to managing finances, and obviously there's a large Asian contingent here, so I'm maybe speaking to that space. There's a couple of things I can say. One is there's things that are cultural, which we admire and are good, and we can continue with some of the cultural aspects, and then there's the biblical model. And I'm going to focus a little bit on the biblical model before I get into the cultural. One is we leave and cleave. We leave our household, we leave our family of origin, we leave those, we have a little bit of influence by our family of origin, but we start afresh. Husband and wife, we're getting married, and we are starting a new family. That doesn't mean the mum, the dad, the in-laws, and everyone else has a say in your relationship, because it's not healthy. You're meant to leave. They can still influence, you can still honour them, but they don't have control. So the cultural aspect, in some Asian cultures, was that you're responsible for looking after the mother or the father, and they move into the household, and I understand that, and sometimes it could be from a financial point of view, it may be beneficial, but also I don't think we should get into the mindset that you are morally responsible. Now that may be because that's what the previous generations have done, but I don't think it's necessarily healthy, because it's going to place an extraordinary burden. And so a way of honouring is having these conversations earlier rather than later about right-sizing expectations. Because you'd never want to assume that as soon as they get to a certain age that you have to welcome them into the household. That might be that, if one of the spouses died and they have to move into the household, that may happen. But it's better to actually right-size expectations well before they take place. I'll give you an example just from our family. Is my father died. And my mum has already said that if she doesn't want to be put into a nursing home, she's told us this, she doesn't want to go to a nursing home, especially after the scare of COVID. But we know that expectation. So we will do everything we humanly can to keep her as practical in her own home. But she's also said, I don't want to move in with you. I like you and I want to, but I don't want to add that burden to you. So we've had that conversation, that the expectation is being ruled, is being resolved before something would happen. So I would say in a cultural aspect, I think it would be better to have the conversations. What are your expectations going into your maturity years? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about moving in? What is the right thinking? Because then, this is again that inheritance, that estate planning. If they sell their property and move in, where does that money go? Where does it go? And I know a friend of mine who's the son and daughter-in-law have bought a house with mum and dad. It's separate separate houses, but they didn't think about this, that they invested X amount of dollars and the other person invested X amount of dollars. The house is appreciated, so then if they sell the house, they get 50-50%. But the siblings that didn't have that opportunity have missed out. Do you see how that's a big factor? And I'd also say if you're marrying again or a blended family, you have to start thinking about the children, the biological children, the stepchildren, who gets what. My sister-in-law at the moment mother has just died. Her second husband, who she'd been with for 20 years, died 20 years ago. And a long-lost relative has now come out of the woodwork and is now asking with hand in hand out, I need to get some of the inheritance, even though they had no relationship. So again, that may seem like you can't predict for all those things, but you have to start thinking about inheritance planning. Who's going to get what? It makes things a lot simpler. Hopefully that's helpful and I've answered all the questions. Does anyone else? Is there another question? I just don't want to miss anyone. Just to let you know, if you haven't, you can contact me through all these various forms, and just remember there's a seminar on Sunday morning at 11:45. I think lunch is included.
Thank you so much, Brett. Put your hands together. Yeah, thank you so much. I got a lot out of that. Generosity is the word I got. That's something that I need to think a lot more about. Not just how I manage my own finances, but how much I give away, and how I can bless others. So thank you very much for that. And as we said...